Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are really happy to have a great group of panelists today in our discussion. Uh, the topic that we chose when I was talking to Peter Crabtree a while back for the Best Center presentation today, we were trying to figure out what would be a good topic to share with individuals and leaders out in the built environment on how to scale and really move energy efficiency projects, and how do leaders and those companies differentiate themselves from other organizations. And what came to mind were a core group of individuals that are on the call now, and they really stood out as far as the things that they are doing with their organizations and what their organizations are doing with their buildings. And I'm really happy to have on the call Jim Soutter, who is the Vice President of Engineering with Hudson Pacific Properties, and John Scott, the Senior Vice President for Colliers International, and Kenneth Seeton, the Energy Manager with Cal State Dominguez Hills. And I know each one of these, there's just a little bio about me, but there's a little bit of information about Jim. Jim's got a number of years of experience with, and I just learned, I didn't know he was at the Stanford facility running engineering crews and operations. And at his organization now, Hudson Pacific Properties, they have a number of Class A buildings across the US that they're converting into high performance buildings, and it's really nice to see. And Jim will go into a little more detail about his organization, his company. John Scott, I know John very well for years now. John's been a colleague of mine, on the speaking trail, working in China, working in buildings across the US. And John's got a lot of experience as a BOMA fellow and a leader at his organization, and he'll share with you some of the things that they're doing. And I just met Kenny not too long ago, but I was really impressed by some of the phenomenal things he's doing at Cal State Dominguez, and is not only throughout the whole campus, but at his chiller plant, just some of the high efficiency, high performance retrofits and controls that he's doing. So, these are some of the things that leaders and organizations do, not by chance. It's because somebody feels it's worth the work, the effort, and the money to transform their buildings into high efficient buildings. And what are the benefits from that? We'll go into a little explanation about that. So if you wouldn't mind, Jim, if you want to give a little overview about yourself and why your organization's commitment and leadership with proactive upgrades really improve energy efficiency.
Sure. Thank you, Carlos. Happy New Year, everybody. So my background is actually in marine engineering. I sailed on a number of U.S. flag vessels when I graduated college. And then I got into the power plant business working for General Electric. That's how I ended up at Stanford running the central plant in the cogen facility that used to be there. And for the last, 17, 18 years, I've been working in commercial real estate. I worked at an equity office, which was a massive REIT at one point, and got sold off. And I was working on a portfolio for them that got sold to Hudson Pacific. And ultimately, I run engineering for Hudson. And until 2 years ago, I also ran sustainability, kind of dual role. And what Hudson, Hudson's a West Coast REIT, primarily an office, but we also own 3 movie studios in Hollywood. And we are developing some others, which gives me an opportunity to weigh in on the front end on stuff. So like we're developing a studio outside of London, England, and we're going all electric. It's pretty exciting. We have battery storage, and it's really neat to be there. But most of my job is what I inherited, right? Different building styles, sizes. We have a 1 million square foot building in San Francisco, and we got like 10,000 square foot buildings in certain places and everything in between. My bread and butter is probably the 150 to 200,000 square foot suburban office building. And most of the assets are probably 30, the average age is probably about 34 years old. So we're at the point where everything, has either failed or got to that failing point. And so Hudson, when they bought the portfolio I worked on in Northern California, they planned on investing a bunch of capital. And that gave me the opportunity to do a lot of, not the low hanging fruit that we had probably attacked earlier, but things like, pneumatic to DVC conversion, which is very expensive and very time consuming. And it's really hard to pencil
my phone.
big savings. However, Hudson's been very generous and wants to be the leader. We also have done a lot of work with the local utilities to exploit their programs. And we have a very robust 10-year capital plan that me and my team are, it's a living document where we're constantly doing better. But we, flag kind of our ESG work so that we can see what that pipeline is, how much money we plan on spending. We have a number of JV partners that they get excited when they see us, doing great projects. So I don't know how much more you need from me on this, Carlos, but
no, that's a good overview, good start.
Okay.
Thank you. John?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me to this, Carlos, and Lawrence Berkeley and Berkeley University. I'm blessed to work in our industry, and it's great to see our industry starting to mature in energy efficiency and sustainability. Carlos, as you and I have worked together for many, many years on that, with groups such as BOMA International and the Better Building Alliance with the Department of Energy, and we were talking about earlier, BOMA China. My background really started in development, working for Lincoln Property Company and the Hogan Group, developing buildings throughout the Southeast. And then I transitioned into third-party firms, working with Cushman and Wakefield and Colliers. Presently, I oversight 300 plus buildings of office, industrial, and retail. And they're all in varying degrees of working on energy efficiency and sustainability. So we have multiple different plans going on at the same time, working with different tenants, retail being triple net tenants, and then we in the office buildings, which is much more readily available to do the work. But Colliers as a whole, and Jim mentioned this, working on our ESG platform as a public company, is integrating our own spaces throughout the US and the globe in those same type of retrofits that we're working. So in some of my answers later on, you're going to hear me discuss both the internal side of Colliers, but also the external business we do with multiple ownerships. And a lot of them that I work with are known to the audience: Nuveen, formerly TIA, Craft, Principal, Global Real Estate, and others. So it's a lot of fun to discuss this. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Would you, on the call, whoever, can you mute your phone until you'd like to ask a question? Thank you. So John, can you give a brief explanation for the audience what ESG is for the corporate real estate world?
Yes. So in the corporate real estate world, our core values and missions have changed dramatically over my 30 plus years in this industry, from let's have a healthy bottom line and a top line of revenue, into more, what are we looking at? How are we training our personnel? What is the health of the space they're working in? This global pandemic, as you know, has brought a whole new thought pattern to where we house our corporate employees, as well as the buildings that we manage for other entities or for real estate funds. And what we've seen change in that is a perspective of our clients wanting their spaces to be the top of the line. I mentioned Nuveen, Principal Global Real Estate. Their focus is to drive ESG into their funds at this point in time. You and I both know years ago, the European groups already had that driven into the funds and their investments. So I did a lot of work with German funds and a lot of European funds, and they were very ahead of us in that maturity. Now the US is focused on that. Colliers in general with its global ESG prerogative, but if you go back and look a decade ago to the core values and missions of each of these groups, you're going to see a significant change into ESG. What does that mean to our buildings and to our tenants and to our clients? It means that we have to adapt and overcome different variables. And you and I have discussed, and I'll be mentioning this a few times in this discussion, low-hanging fruit that you and I have been picking for many years, but now we're getting into more complicated types of abilities to create value. And I think that's the bottom line, Carlos. Are we creating value for our occupants? Are we creating value for the project? Are we creating value for the fund? And the answer from all of us now is all three of them that we have to take into account. So that's how I've seen the changes and what's being incorporated in my world. And I'm excited to hear from Kenny on his central plant, because I know that's a strong add in that.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that, John. Kenny.
Hello. All right. So how I got here, first of all, a little bit. I got here kicking and screaming. I wasn't a sustainability person like a lot of you are. I spent 27 years working at probably one of the 5th largest bakeries in the United States for Hostess cupcakes. And so my job was to keep it running no matter what it took, because it's $1,000 a minute or whatever when it's down. And that was my whole life. I heard about this job probably 5 years before I got it, because the chief engineer was one of those guys that was in retirement mode forever. And when they first told me about it, I said, why would I want to go work on buildings? That's got to be the boringest job out there. How hard is it to push air through a building? Anyway, long story short, I ended up taking the job 5 years later and died and went to heaven, because I enjoy fixing things and problems. And to me, energy efficiency is a giant puzzle. When I got to this campus, the leadership we had at the time, they weren't concerned. There was no budget. There was no energy person. My job was plant manager first, and if I have time, then do energy stuff. And the first thing I did, we were talking about this a little at the beginning, was just fix the things that are broken. All I cared about was saving money. It wasn't about greenhouse gas. It wasn't about the environment. It was how do we fix things and save money? And 3 years in, I found out that I was spending the same amount of money as the guy before me, but my buildings were all running way more efficient and we were saving on utilities. And it just grew from there. My message to a bunch of you is, if you feel like you're alone in your company, don't worry about it. Just do the right thing, and eventually they'll see what's going on. And that's kind of how I got my start, and just kept going to some of the stuff that I'll talk about a little bit later. And I created that environment of core, right? I created CSU Dominguez Hills as the campus that the other 22 campuses go, hey, what are they doing over there now? Let's see, So yeah, that's how we got here and where we're at now.
Yeah, that's a great story, Kenny. And when you mentioned you created that core, it's that creation that we want to explore a little bit more into with each and every one of you, so that other individuals can create that same core with their organization. Just doesn't happen, but with leadership like yourselves, people get it. The C-suite individuals, they know it's great business, it's good for branding, and there's just all great benefits. So I will start with some of the questions. First question is, explain how energy efficiency and sustainability has become a core part of your organization's business strategy, and is it paying off? Jim?
Yeah, I mentioned, or we've all been talking about ESG. I mean, our energy strategy folds into our ESG strategy. We've done all kinds of upgrades, the low-hanging fruit, the larger stuff, and some of it is done not just to save energy or to be more sustainable, but it's also a maintenance approach. So I have a large number of reciprocating compressors that are, a pain to maintain, and they blow up all the time. And so we went and started exploring different tech, and pretty much have gone to screw type technology, lowering our maintenance costs and also benefiting with the lower energy use. So there's an example of really attacking a maintenance issue, but having the benefits of the energy savings as well. So in that particular example, which there's a lot of, it's fairly big.
In other words, gas vehicles. So.
And has your leadership communicated down to the rest of the organization? I know that you have what's called through your, it's called the Better Blueprint for
No, column
Sustainability.
M, isn't
Yeah.
it this one?
And
Column M, I put column L. You're saying column M.
let's see. Could
Right.
we have whoever is talking on the call, please mute your phone?
They just muted themselves.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah. If you could go into a little explanation about your Better Blueprint, your sustainability program. from
Yeah,
an
so as I
organizational standpoint.
mentioned, I ran the sustainability program for the company until we hired Natalie Tier, who's our SVP of sustainability. And so I was charged with a number of things. One, getting our sustainability program kicked off. Energy Star was the first thing I attacked. We then put together a sustainability program framework, policy, and we submitted for GRES a number of years ago. And we were way behind everybody. And so we started to put in place a whole number of things. And I commissioned the first corporate sustainability report. What Natalie has done is taken it, to the next level and created this Better Blueprint, which is a long-term strategy for our ESG program that the company has. And it's not just energy. There's a huge social component. All our assets, as you mentioned, are on the West Coast. We have a huge homeless issue in and around our building. So we focus very heavily on, funding homeless, charitable organizations. And this is from our CEO and board on down. I mean, ESG is become, just part of our company's DNA. So when it comes to an energy savings project, if Jim says it's good to do, they give me go ahead and do it.
That's one part of the corporate real estate world that most people don't hear. I mean, I've had discussions with people that, corporate real estate is just about the bottom line, the revenue. And, you're telling me that you're putting money back into certain communities for the homelessness. That's a great message there.
It is. And I would argue we're a top line company.
Yeah.
I think that's the way our CFO and president and CEO, they all look at it. It's the bottom line will find itself as long as you have a good top line.
Well, that's the purpose of this topic that, when Peter and I talked about it, we wanted to share these best practices with leading companies like yourself and see how other organizations could possibly implement these. John, excited to hear what Colliers, I know Colliers has done a lot of great things and what you've done. So.
Yeah, so talking from the inside out, and then Carlos, our friend Dee Chappelle Wright was a part of this, but one of the areas where we focused on is how that we could communicate and create more value within our structure. And I bring up the appraisal and valuation group that we work with in Colliers, because a lot of times when they meet with our clients, they're one of the first ones entered into a project, whether it's new or existing, if they're looking at the value added. And one of the great things I believe Colliers has been able to complete is all of our appraisal personnel. Sorry, I'm working from home, guys. So, yeah, so with our appraisal group, and we've been able to go out and create this value by handing to our clients. They will come to me, the appraisal group, and say, we're looking at this building, what would your suggestions be? And they can give them an appraisal based on just the standard appraisal, or if there were some form of sustainability or energy efficiency initiatives that are placed into that, whether they're selling or buying this project. And I think that's been a huge plus for our clients. And they keep coming back to it and actually ask us now and say, oh, wow, can you give us what this would look like with this much capital invested into it? So I think that's a big game changer that we've been working on together. And part of which is Jim is what he was talking about, is the fact that how we're portraying energy efficiency and sustainability is different in today's time, as we were talking about. So everybody talks about ESG. You and I used to talk about, again, oh, we want to reduce operating expenses now, but our whole discussion is revolved around how do we keep the health of our employees up during this period of time. So we can reduce the utility expenses, or we can increase productivity. And that discussion has really started maturing a lot. And as you know, we have wellness out there, or well and fit, and all of those different items. But when you can reduce the $3 per square foot cost on utilities, that's great. But when you increase productivity within the square footage you have, that's at $50 a foot, that's a huge, huge revenue generator, and you're doing the right thing. So I think those two have been the biggest changes that we've seen, particularly since the pandemic.
Great. Yeah, there's the 330-300 rule and employee productivity. The whole wellness environment now, and making our buildings more healthier is really, really important. For our occupants to come back in and feel that they're safe in the building. So that's great. And Kenny, with your campus there, well beyond the chiller plant, how did you get, a lot of different stakeholders to buy into your vision on energy and sustainability? Yeah, you're on mute.
I know, I saw that. With 1,000 tiny projects. Instead of waiting for somebody to give me $1 million to do a building, I can't imagine being an energy manager and not also the chief engineer. So that's one thing that I have that a lot of people don't, right? So I have 11 people that work underneath me that I've built a team that, if I tell them to go change lights, they're refrigeration mechanics, and they're like, oh, okay, and so I would use my own operating budget for the central plant to put in a lighting system that cost a couple $1,000s for one classroom, knowing that the next classroom only cost, half of that because I put the backbone in. And going back to even the central plant, moving to the air handlers at the building level, when I learned about like the Belimo smart energy valves that could tell me what the flow is going through the chiller and adjust the delta T and everything for me, and cost the same amount of money to put one of those valves in as it would have cost to put in, let's just say, whoever's, flow control valve that you also then had to put a GPM meter in. It was just a bunch of little things like that. I've done lots of large projects now, but in the beginning, I didn't call them projects. They were just, like you said, maintenance, right? Jim was like, look, we got to do maintenance on these buildings. And those maintenance things a lot of them were emerging tech. And so by doing those small things, I started playing with occupancy-based controls back in 2013. But at first it was just, fancy smart lighting system. And after doing a few of them, then all of a sudden I had other faculty or staff going, hey, how they got those cool lights? How come I can't adjust the light levels in my room? How come I have to take the light bulbs out? And I'm like, well, talk to your dean, talk to my vice president, and say how great you think that is. And then sure enough, that summer we'd be doing 5 classroom or office remodels, and I got to put my stuff in. So it built small over, like I said, I started in 2011. I spent 3, 4, or 5 years, building up that groundwork. And then to make it grow even further, what I've learned recently in the last 2 or 3 years is that sustainability is sexier than energy. I don't think that, but most of the people that we have to deal with do, right? And so I was also the sustainability person for the first bunch of years here. I saved up enough rebate money and paid for the sustainability manager her first 2 years here out of my own savings. And she just blew it up, because Now it's about the people, right? So if we can connect what we do, for me, it's connecting it to the students, right? For you, for some of you, right, it might be, connecting to that customer, or, who's going to rent that space, or the public that goes into that space. How do we tell that story so that we get that visibility out of it? That then increases what we're doing by giving us more leverage to do more of the right thing. And that's worked really well for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned sustainability being the sexy part of the work that we do, even though the energy efficiency portion, really makes the buildings more efficient, saves a lot of money. But in the eyes of a lot of individuals, investors, occupants, that sustainability portion is so important. Saving the planet, reducing carbon, making the environment more healthy. And that
we do that, but we're not, as energy people, we're not as good at telling the story,
right,
as the sustainability side of the house, I think.
Great point. That leads us into our next question. If you can describe in a few sentences how your company or organization differentiates itself in its efforts with energy efficiency and sustainability investments. Jim?
Sure. Well, I think Hudson, we want to be the best, right? We want to be the best, REIT on the West Coast. And, so we set some goals in our ESG framework, and then it all kind of funnels down from there, where, we had, a goal of getting all of our non-triple net buildings Energy Star certified. And I think we're at like 78% right now, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And we keep marching towards that. We set a Fitwell goal, and that's a much lower goal, but I think we have more Fitwell buildings than anybody does right now. And I mentioned GRESB earlier, and for those of you guys that don't know what GRESB is, it's oh, you blew me up here. I forget. GRESB, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and it's a pretty complicated, program where you submit all this information, but a lot of it is the energy piece and your year-over-year savings, capital projects, and so we use that as a measurement tool where we fall in with our peers. And so, as I mentioned, the first time we did it, we were solidly in last place. I think in the 14 other REITs that are in our peer group, we were number 2 this year. So in less than, 4 years, we went from last to second place.
Yeah, that's quite an achievement. If you could give a little brief explanation of what Fitwell is.
Fitwell is a health score for the buildings.
Okay.
And so we endeavored down that path. There's not a lot of expertise in Fitwell, so one of my employees became an expert. And so we've done it on a number of high-profile buildings, like the Ferry Building that we own in San Francisco. All of our new developments, we've incorporated Fitwell. And it's not that difficult of a lift. It's easier than something like Well, which is a little more complicated.
Just another one of those things that your organization decides to go above and beyond to make the buildings more healthy, operate better. Exactly. John, what about with your organization?
So I would say a lot of what Jim applies in our direction, but one of the key components he was referring to is the communication to all team members on properties. And I think going down from maintenance and engineering and property management through our project management teams is where we've made a huge difference, is trying to get them all together and working on the same goals together, particularly on energy efficiency, because our project management group is independent of the other property groups. So what we've been able to do is forge together an alliance on the projects. And I have 50 to 60 projects going on from ground up construction through retrofits of different buildings. And I would use one particular case, and I think you saw this presentation by me, Carlos, my ugly building where we took a 1973 high-rise building and converted that in from a B- building into an A building and created value for them. But that was everyone working together, or even our leasing team implementing green leasing, our maintenance and engineering staff working with project management on the retrofits of the chillers, the plumbing systems, low flow closets. I mean, it's an integrated approach to both effectively put together an energy efficiency and a sustainability plan. And to both Kenny and Jim's point, if you don't combine those two, because one is selling one type of service, the other one's selling the other one, how do we integrate those two together so we bond them? And that was that Park Tower case study that we did, where we made the ownership very happy. Spent $13 million of theirs, and when they sold the project, they reaped that and much more out of it. So I think it's the communication level from top to bottom across the board and trying to achieve your goals is what I think is the most important factor.
Okay, great. Kenny?
That's a difficult question for us. For me, we differentiate because but we've been in a giant growth spurt. So, you know, we just in the last 2.5 years have built 3 buildings, and they're trying to build 3 more. So this campus is really growing. Their focus is on that. What we're doing a good job at, though, is building a team. We have, you know, new president, new vice president that supports us in the sustainability and on my side, the energy stuff. So where, you know, they want to be leaders in the community and share that stuff. But I would be lying if I said that it was, you know, out there in the front of things. The fact that we have support to do the things that we're doing is really great. And the fact that we're focusing on trying to hire people that have those same core values and that we're supported in that is one of the things that we're doing.
Well, I just think from university standpoint, you're getting noticed. People in industry know what you're doing. I mean, like myself and others, you know, like on this call, just hearing what you're doing, and vendors know what you're doing. So, you know, from your organizational leadership, they have to see and know that it's making a big difference, and they have to support it. So that's
right. And they let me, you know, like before COVID, I probably did 5 or 6 speaking things a year and paid my own way for all of them instead of getting paid for it. Right? They're like, no, we don't want to play with that game. We'll just, you know, we'll pay for your hotel and airfare and stuff, you know. And so I've been supported to get the name out there. So, you know, they're getting behind it on that. I miss that, truthfully. You know, Zooms aren't near as much fun as getting to meet people in person, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, good. Next question I wanted to ask, in what way do you yourself influence decision-making within the organization on operational and major capital expenditures that involve energy efficiency and sustainability? Jim?
Sure. Well, I control the company's capital budget, as I mentioned, back of house capital budget. And so I have a team of 11, you know, engineering professionals that work, you know, underneath my organization. And they're the ones that have to come to me and, you know, sell their story. You know, oftentimes we do look for a payback. You know, we did a solar project in San Jose that the payback, you know, I think with some creative math, we got it, you know, 9.5 years or something like that. But it was more about doing the project, getting our feet wet on it, and having that support from above was awesome. That project, to be honest with you, was pretty easy. But you know, as I mentioned, I control the capital, but we try to do it in a strategic way. And so when we have, again, these reciprocating chillers failing left and right, it's like, well, guys, we got to think of a different approach here. And as I mentioned, we changed, you know, the type of machine, but we also benefited from the energy savings. So I take this role I don't take it lightly. I think my capital budget this year is $65 million, like 400 and something projects in there. And yet it's super neat to, have shiny and new, but also to have those operational flexibilities. These buildings, some of them had, a building control system running on Windows Me. I'm not kidding. We had one of those.
So did we.
And to be able to go to full DDC with a modern control system, it's night and day. It's really neat to see that.
Yeah. The solar project, was that the Metro Place?
Yeah, Metro Plaza.
Yeah, above the garage parking area there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sean Kelly ran that job for me.
Yeah, I remember that one.
One of my most talented people, if not the one. So.
John.
Sure. Well, we work on numerous projects, so I'll just pull one out, Carlos, to talk about and how we worked with both the client and within Colliers. It's a new St. Petersburg Pier that just opened during the pandemic, of course, July 6th of 2020. We worked on that project for 7 years with the city of St. Pete, the mayor and his office and development teams. And from the beginning, Colliers did the branding for the project. We put together the playbook, as you would call it, of what we were creating, how it was going to be marketed, and what the components of it would be. And one of the great success stories of it, and I think last year it was listed as the second best new place to go in the world by Condé Nast. So it's been a complete success, all due to the city and their wise investments and understanding. But we added components of solar, we added components of energy efficiency, water efficiency throughout this 26-acre, what we call a playground or district. We have multiple restaurants that are engaged in the sustainability and energy efficiency parts of this. We have playgrounds for children that are all very well maintained under energy efficiency and sustainability. There's a lot of community investment. So we run about 10,000 people a day through this 26-acre district. And we've been able to reduce the operating expenses from the old pier that was in its place, which only had one building. We have 7. Dramatically, and salvage water. Since it extends out over a saltwater, which is called Tampa Bay, we also had to implement some measures that would help as far as with the rebar and the concrete and steel. And we were able to use some very, very sustainable methods in doing that, and reusing the pile casts that were from the old pier and reduce costs, but also, as you know, reuse instead of pouring new concrete piles. So this entire structure was thought about from a branding standpoint. And even the old wooden pier that was utilized, and it was moved off the building to be utilized in the community center for historical reclamation. So there are so many different avenues that you can work on in these new projects if you have someone who's willing to discuss it. But you also go into other buildings where people are only willing to look at the low-hanging fruit, as we know, Carlos. And so it's always trying to find that balance, both for the type of ownership or the funding that you have, and make those best, most prudent investments.
Mm-hmm. Kenny?
Yeah, so funny story again. I was presenting at a conference one time, and they asked me, how do you get things past upper management, or how hard is it to do? And I said, well, for the vendor, it's easy because they're dealing with me, and if it's energy, then I get it. But for me, I got to be twice as good a salesperson as the vendor, so that I can sell it to somebody that really doesn't understand, right? The C-suite, they don't get all the different benefits. And so that goes to, I spent a year and a half to convince them that I can put a 4 megawatt-hour battery system in for free, and no shared savings, no nothing. It was a combination of LCR money in Southern California, local capacity reserve program that was available at the time, and great marketing for the company that got to put something on a California campus, right? And yet it still took me a year to convince them that this was a good project. I spent 3 years before I got the green light to do solar, and then and then it took 2 years to get the solar on this campus. In fact, December 21st, we got our permit to operate. So it was a really cool Christmas present. Although I was like a little kid at Christmas who got the great toy with no batteries because we had rain for 3 days after the solar got turned on and I couldn't see the stuff, you know. And so it's, you know, your question was, you know, who makes this happen? It's me, right? It's visiting US Green Building Council and seeing entrepreneurs and seeing new technology and trying out pilots and then finding something that works and then becoming a salesperson to sell it to my upper management, you know.
Yeah, right.
I'm the one that's finding the CEC grants and, you know, putting us out there like, hey, let's do this CEC grant to get this stuff done. You know, look, it's going to cost us $300,000 to get $2 million worth of lighting and controls and window blinds. How is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing because I end up having to also be the project manager for every one of these things I do. But we're not going to get there if you know, you don't put the time in. So.
Yeah, and I think just hearing all of your stories, it really does take a champion within an organization to move these through. You know, somebody to believe in the work that's being done in the projects and know that they yield, you know, great benefits all the way around, and to take that message up and to really, you know, take a stand and say, you know, this is good for our organization, our tenants, the community, you know, all around. So I wanted to jump to this next question, and then depending upon what our time is, I'd like to open it up for some questions. But there's always a collaborative effort with industry partners. And I wanted to ask all of you, how does your organization collaborate with industry on what you're doing? Jim?
Well, so when I was running the sustainability program, I was going to a lot of sustainability meetings, primarily NAREIT meetings. And I was able to share an awful lot of information, you know, back and forth, finding trends. I think our biggest way we're doing that now is just with industry contacts and organizations. While I'm not a big BOMA guy, just because I just don't feel like I have time to participate much, I love the BOMA International Show. I learn a lot every time I go, and I encourage, you know, my team to go as well. I really feel like that show's more of an engineering show than anything else, but it's all property managers. And I think it's also we focus on prop tech a lot, and whether it's sustainability, you know, or energy savings or not. And I run that kind of innovation prop tech team. And the way we've approached it is we've got to break some eggs to make the cake. And so we're trying different things out. I mean, I get it, you know, 20 calls a day from vendors. They got some secret sauce. They can say, well, I can't possibly try it all, but I don't want to be blind to the fact that we've got to try some of this stuff. You know, everybody in my team, they laughed about VRF, you know, 10 years ago. It'll never work. And we have it everywhere now. It works great. You know, so,
right.
But if we weren't willing to try it, we wouldn't have it all over the place.
Right. And what he's referring to is variable refrigerant flow. It's a new type of refrigerant system that is just really kind of hands off for the operator and works. It's bulletproof. So, John?
Well, I'm involved with a lot of different groups because many of the changes we've been able to affect, and since my life and my home are in Florida most of the time, and we're ground zero, particularly South Florida, for a lot of climate changes. I've been active from multiple levels trying to change legislation to support some of our initiatives. But Jim mentioned BOMA. So BOMA International, Carlos, you know, you and I worked on the 7-point challenge and energy reduction for them and wastewater reduction and many other items. They've been a great group. They're the only group that works with the national and international code councils, which I think is very important to what we're trying to change. So I've been part of the International Code Council writing group from BOMA International for at least a decade. And trying to get changes in via ASHRAE and into the International Code Council helps our initiatives, both from energy efficiency, creating the codes that require these things to happen without being belligerent or causing people to expend an excessive amount of money, all the way down to the Miami-Dade County that I work on resiliency, help write legislation for them around commercial office buildings, how we can implement changes on a steady basis instead of an impactful basis, but change the environment and the culture, which we started in 2010. And it's been very productive for them, including Miami Beach. And I worked at the state of Florida legislative level through BOMA, Florida, on the legislation for the uniform building codes. And we actually have a person who sits on that group. So I think sometimes you have to work inside of the legislative process to make these changes to support initiatives, and then be able to implement those on the exterior side, which is us as we're working in our day-to-day jobs. So I think it's fundamentally very important for groups to work together to make these changes on a national and international level.
Okay. Kenny?
Say the question again. I was answering questions.
How do you collaborate with industry on the projects you're working on?
Oh, so extremely well and a lot. One of the first projects that helped me a lot was I got invested in building analytics with the SkySpark platform. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, every project that I do, I'm able to give the people that I collaborate with their own login so they can see the data. I would implore all of you that if you haven't done it yet, sub-metering is the most important thing that you can do first, and then putting that into some kind of trend data that you can share with others will open you up to doing pilot projects and stuff. But I have a great relationship with Southern California Edison. I have a great relationship with Southern California Gas Company. I have great relationship with the U.S. Green Building Council. So every year they do their elevator pitches with new entrepreneurs, and they're looking for mentors and pilot sites. And unfortunately, I walk away with 5 or 6 every time and go, oh, how am I going to find time to, talk to all these people, and, what can we do, and that kind of stuff. And then collaborating even at these and networking, I speak to and engineer on projects that we've done all over the world. We used to have a team when I put in the 4 megawatt-hour battery. It's one of the largest in SoCal behind the meters. It's not a utility. And I would host a delegation from China before COVID, like 3 years in a row. They would come out here, and I'd meet them here on a Sunday because that's when they had free time, and show them the battery, and we have a little picnic, so networking is important. LinkedIn, if you look at my LinkedIn feed, I actually, when I do projects, I share that data. Hey, we did this and it's doing this. Now, if it's bad, I try not to share it, but I share the good stuff to the point where I have to worry about getting in trouble at work because we're not supposed to endorse anybody's stuff. But that's one of my pet peeves on LinkedIn, is everybody's afraid to say the product that they're using for whatever reason. But if we don't say that, then how do the good products grow, right? And I say that because I'm used to working with entrepreneurs, right? I've seen some great stuff, and it goes away because they can't get it marketed, or nobody will say that it works or try it out. And so it's important for us to share that data, right? And to do these small pilots and stuff. And it also gets us, I can't count on any of them that I've done that didn't work, that cost me money, right? And so besides from my time, yes, it took my time to put in the latest and greatest black box that did nothing. But the other stuff has all had some benefit, And so anyway, that's collaboration.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of leaders in your positions, and when I was working for my former real estate company, there's always a concern of confidentiality, or a conflict of, not confidentiality, but conflict of interest of naming a company because you don't want to promote them. But there are a lot of individuals that are looking for good recommendations on on some of these types of systems or controls or solutions that I think we need to do a better job at really getting that information out. And it's up to the individual or the group to do their research and find out if it's good for them. I did want to make one mention, we talk about energy and sustainability. We didn't talk, I think John talked a little bit earlier about water. I don't think we've even begun to see the issue with water conservation as we have. I know in Los Angeles, I do the EWE compliance in LA because with their energy and their water, they're doing water auditing very aggressively. And even though COVID put it on a little bit of a hiatus for a while, they're going to start back up very aggressively. And there's a lot of municipalities that are really going to be looking at water conservation a lot more aggressively. So I think we're going to be looking at water conservation more seriously than we are now. So I wanted to, and thank you all again, each and every one of you, Jim, John, and Kenny, for taking the time, coming on this this panel discussion for a really important topic, and I hope the individuals listening in on this call, was able to take away something from, the information you provided. So I'm going to open it up to questions if there's anybody that would like to ask a question of our panelists or myself. Don't be shy out there. Come on. Okay, Tim, go for it. You could either raise your hand or just blurt it out. Tim?
Sure, I just unmuted myself.
Okay.
I'm curious if any of you have, in the context of your ESG work, considered the use of skilled and trained labor, which typically is a proxy for union labor, as a best practice? And if so, is that a story that you can tell with respect to the property? This is union built, et cetera. I mean, it's considered in some circles a measure of quality. But I'm curious how that plays out for you.
And Tim, would you take just a second to say where you're from?
Sure, I'm the executive director of the Center for Sustainable Neighborhoods. So
Okay,
we
thank
support
you.
policies and projects that help build sustainable neighborhoods. And I've served for a while on the Location and Planning Technical Advisory Committee for the U.S. Green Building Council. I've been interested in sustainability issues for a long time. This
Okay.
is just a particular issue I think that often gets very little play, but it has some real utility to it in terms of meeting both social and performance metrics for projects.
Would anyone like to tackle that question?
I'll give a stab at it. Personally, I'm agnostic to union or non-union. It depends on the need. Hudson's a developer, and we build large buildings. We generally have union labor on those projects. I've got 150 or so third-party building engineers. I'd say 75% of them are union, but I couldn't go union in San Jose. I've run out of people. There's just not that many. We have assets in Seattle, which I think on the construction side is very heavy unionized. On the building engineering side, good luck finding union engineers. But I tend to agree with you. Union folks with apprenticeship programs and stuff, they're higher trained. They have better skills. It becomes a cost issue. I know on our retail mom and pop things, they always want to use non-union labor, just because it's expensive to build something in, San Francisco, Los Angeles, whatever. And they run into a number of problems, but I don't know about the marketability. I've never heard a tenant ask, in the leasing, negotiations that, is this a union or non-union building? I haven't heard of it coming up.
Yeah, in the state of California, everything we do is union, so that's a moot point for me.
Yeah.
So throughout the US, we have union, non-union areas where we function and work within Colliers. So to Jim's point, there in a lot of the areas where unions are, labor that we utilize or our teams are part of the union, it is considered a higher level. So I understand that type of branding. Throughout some of the Southeast, there's very little union labor available. So you're just looking for the best out of the craftsmen that are available. So it's just hit or miss for us within Colliers.
You know, and from a workforce development standpoint, and that's another part of my business that I do with the community colleges and just throughout different parts of industry, we are really facing a big problem in our workforce right now. You know, you've heard the term, the silver tsunami, individuals in their late 50s and 60s, they're leaving and they're not transferring that knowledge down to other individuals. And we are in a big crunch of problem. And we're not going to be able to fill those positions with knowledgeable individuals. So we're going to have to make some really drastic changes in how we get in front of students and individuals, incumbent workers, or those that, you know, want to get into this career pathway, to entice them, train them like we used to. You know, we used to really train our individuals, but now it's, you know, individuals go into a program and after 2-3 months, they're hired quickly because employers just want a warm body. It's not so much in the union environments, but in the non-union environments, it happens all the time. You know, we need trained employees and individuals. So that's an effort that is occurring that, you know, we just need to do a better job at. Any other questions out there as we have a minute or two that we can wind down? If not, is there anyone that would like to ask a last minute question? And you're right, we need to push this training into high school, and we're starting to do that. The program directors and the decision makers are starting to see facilities maintenance and the trades as one of those career pathways that provides above livable wages and, you know, a lifelong career for their families. So we just need to get to those individuals and sell them on trades.
Yeah, Carlos, that is my biggest problem. It has been for years. I mean, I've got a number of my employees or chief engineers or whatever that work for me. Their children work for me now too, because
Right.
I've got a number of them into apprenticeship programs. But I think there is a little bit of this. You got to go to college to be successful in this country, and I don't know what a chief engineer makes in San Francisco now, but it's north of $150,000 a year without overtime, with a 100% paid medical thing. Most college graduates don't have that, and so,
So
there should be more people wanting these jobs.
So if I can add to that, guys, there's a Harvard study that a person that goes through Harvard and becomes a doctor, and someone who goes to a 2 years trade school and graduates with plumbing, gets a contractor's license, they literally make about the same amount of money until after 50 years old, where the doctor eventually pulls away, but the living that is made is on par up until that time and is still very valuable. So those are the things. And I go to all the technical schools, like Carlos is mentioning, trying to draft talent to bring them into our operations. So that is something that's facing us in a large degree.
Right. Well, again, I want to thank, Jim, John, and Kenny very much for your time today and participating in this panel discussion. And thank you for all of our attendees for listening in and those questions. And I know this is recorded, so it'll be available for all if you want to view it or have it for later. So thank you. Have a great day, and stay safe and healthy out there.
Thanks, Carlos.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.